Hello, visibility enthusiasts. Welcome to the Beyond Visibility Lounge, the podcast that explores the seen and unseen world of the supply chain, logistics, transportation, and traceability. I'm your host, Ileriana Kashaniku.
And I'm your co-host, Ron Volpe.
And together, we are on a mission to inspire collaborative visibility innovations in the future. For this episode, we traveled all the way to Malaysia, though we did it virtually. We had a very strong reason to do so. It's the halal food supply chain. For the 10th consecutive year, the Global Islamic Economy Indicator ranks Malaysia as the leader among 81 countries due to the size of its halal economy. In 2020, Malaysia's halal economy generated 7.5% of its gross domestic product. The food services sector makes up the largest component of the halal industry, and the World Bank estimates that by 2025, it will generate over 47 billion US dollars in revenues. Global spending on halal food, though, is forecasted to reach over 1.6 trillion US dollars. Some studies show that demand for halal food is growing among non-Muslim consumers as well, and that is due to its reputation for cleanliness, hygiene, and palatability. But also because globally consumers are increasingly demanding more information on the foods that they consume. As Malaysia aspires to grow its global presence and competitiveness in servicing 2 billion Muslim consumers of the world, we were curious to learn more about what does it take to trace halal food in global supply chains and what does the future hold for interoperable innovations.
Very well said, Ileriana. And luckily, we had a chance to talk to the person to share insights with us. My good friend Huat is the founder of Intelligence Traceability, iTrace, a company that specializes in providing track and trace solutions for various industries. iTrace solutions identify and capture track and trace events all along the supply chain to provide transparency and insights ranging from source to consumption of products and resources. They provide level 4 and level 5 traceability solutions to Malaysia's halal supply chain, sustainable palm oil, and seafood industry. In 2023, the Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation recognized iTrace as an important player in the Islamic digital economy and awarded its traceability solution with the Innovative Solution for Halal Supply Chain Award.
Wow, this is so interesting. I really cannot wait to see what Day has to share. So let's dive into the conversation. Day, thank you so much for finding time to connect with us and be our guest in the next episode of the Beyond Visibility Lounge, the podcast in which we want to dive into deep conversations about visibility of supply chains, logistics, and transportation. So when we have guests like you coming to share their wisdom, we really want to start the story from the very origins. So we want to ask you as well, why don't you share with us and our audience your journey, how life led you to be an expert on traceability in the food supply chains?
Yeah. So thank you very much for inviting for this morning, Iriana and Ron. So yeah, definitely would be great to share a little bit about my journey. So my background is actually from product testing. So over the years, when the digitalization kicks in, we do observe that the traditional offline kind of lab testing is become changing. So people tend to move from lab testing to online testing. So a lot of things go digital, go online, go automated. So that's the first thing I actually observe. So, and the people are collecting testing data on the production line straightforward. So I think digitalization is moving on that direction. And then 2020, we started my company in 2019. Then 2020, the pandemic kicks in. So when this thing happens, then people are crazy buying masks and crazy buying all kind of medical equipment. Then people are asking for all kind of certification documents. Then you will realize all the certification documents are pretty much all the fakes. CE cert are fakes. The food safety FDA cert, they are all fakes. So for consumer, they have no clue to actually verify whether whatever they are buying is genuine or not. That even proven my ideas of digitalization is important, especially on the certification of products, how people can have a trace of the product to make sure whether they are genuine. It becomes really, really important. And because of our experience in product testing and audit, we also know that for one day audits, the everything looks sunshine, everything look okay, but after that, then is gone. So it's critically important for even auditor to have traceabilities on data that they can collect every day, to ensure they can even remote audit, or they are auditing based on the daily data and all this. So based on this, actually, it gives me how to say, strong belief that it's time for me to move on to this journey, to actually started to explore into digitalization of the supply chain. And the most critical thing about digitalization supply chain is actually traceability. So that is how I started my whole journey.
Oop, here we go. Sorry, I couldn't unmute fast enough. Sorry about that. Hey, Tay. It's really it's always fun to interview, to podcast with friends. Tay and I are good friends. We've worked together in the past, so it's always a delight to have a conversation with Tay. Tay, one of my questions relates to the work you're doing right now in Halal. So I think it's really fantastic work. You, from everything I read, it seems like you're really a leader in the space, not just in Malaysia but elsewhere. So I'm curious to see how that project is going and where you think it's headed in the future.
For this project, actually, is a really promising project for us, because looking into all the countries or different industry are starting to have regulation on traceability, like seafood, like even medicals and all these things. Malaysia, as the leader of halal industry, we think it's critically important that we actually not only be the number one in implementing the halal standard, we should actually take the leads in terms of um, come up with standards for halal traceabilities and all these things. So the good news is we are currently working on a platform, which is a level 4 platform for halal industry for Malaysia. So we are hopefully this can become the prominent platform that can help to provide transparency and also provide the traceability needed for halal industry, for halal supply chain.
And Tay, just a follow up: is it primarily product coming into Malaysia, going out of Malaysia, both?
Both sides. Actually, for this particular projects, we are collaborating with in RCEP. One of the biggest economy is definitely China, and they are the most mature in terms of traceability systems. So we have our first pilot project is working together between Malaysia and China to make sure the traceability platform between two countries can talk to each other, so that when the goods are moving across the borders, and the traceability information can be passed over to the other platform without any problems and all this.
And one more follow up. So, and we were talking before we started. Ilariana brought up the fact that Brazil is such a large
Yes.
exporter of halal product. Are they the biggest halal exporter in the world, or for?
According to the statistic, yes. And in fact, the top 5 countries exporting halal product is actually all from country like Brazil, like US, like India, by like all these, like they are all non-Muslim countries actually. So this become even more critically important, that certain measure have to put in to ensure the authenticity and ensure the halal certification of the products for the Islamic countries.
Tay, with that said, you got me really curious to learn from you. What does tracing halal food entail? Can you walk us through that process or the journey, and what is the most important aspect for the consumers in that journey?
Okay, actually, honestly, halal standard is nothing more. Actually, it's not saying nothing more. It's actually still based on food safety standards. I think food safety standards are everywhere. So people want to ensure the food are actually coming from the reliable sources. They are prepared by reliable people without contamination along the journeys and all these things. That's really important. So what is on top of it is because of their certain believing of halal community that on certain slaughtering pattern, especially slaughtering of the cow for the beef, and also slaughtering for the chicken. Those are a bit different. And during the production processes, it cannot be mixed with certain ingredients. So that is actually critical. So what we did is, on top of the existing food safety regulations, we are adding on additional critical tracking events, and also the element that we want to trace, or which is complying to the halal regulations.
Tay, With respect to regulation in Malaysia,
Mm.
and I just earlier today I was talking about the EU and some of the regulations they have under the Green Deal. Are the regulations in Malaysia? Can you speak to them in terms of do they require and they mandate that traceability has to occur on certain products? Is it an optional thing? What's how does the government look at halal and that requirement and whether that's mandatory or not?
Right now, traceability requirement is not so mandatory in most part of Southeast Asia, honestly. So it was a long time ago for Europe, US, and even China. But Southeast Asia, they are just the beginning. So we do see some countries who is moving ahead of us, like Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, and Malaysia now is doing the catching up. So right now, we don't impose any mandatory traceability for imported products, but we do see some traceability is already in place, especially for tobacco. So we participate in the tobacco project a few years ago that actually demand traceability. And we just have a conversation with Ministry of Health. They are also planning to have traceability requirement built in, but it's going to be implemented later on. Then we now was working into food and beverage industry, and Malaysia definitely we focus in halal food because almost 80% or 90% of the food that is available in the market have to be halal certified because of majority of the population in Malaysia are Malay.
So ever since you mentioned that you're working in halal, one of my other thoughts was at some point there's probably an application for things like kosher as well. And maybe it's not as relevant in Malaysia, but it seems like the same kind of software and solution would be quite relevant for kosher products. I maybe I think of it under the banner of faith-based traceability is probably not the right term, but I feel like kosher could be a place to go at some point too.
Yeah, it could be a place to go for some places, some other places.
Yeah.
Definitely, you are right. Yeah.
Okay, what you highlighted earlier is the disparate regulations in different countries.
Mm.
And what I'm curious to learn from you when it comes to especially end-to-end traceability in the food supply chains, where should the demand for tracing come from more, the consumers or the government regulations? And then in the international globalized food supply chains, how can we balance between different regulations affecting a single food supply chain of foods and the traceability as part of it?
Okay. Actually, in terms of Malaysia, actually we are still very young. So the awareness of the consumers on this is actually not very high. So it's still pretty much depending on the regulations to kicks in. So actually, recently we do have actually not recently but 2020 in Malaysia that we have a quite big issue is called the meat cartel issue. Is beef imported into Malaysia, but people have no idea. They have been consuming for almost 30 years, but that's proven to be horse meat and kangaroo meat from Australia, but they are not beef. So this cross awareness on the people, but after a while people do forget already. So I think what really needed is the regulatory to step up and actually to make it a regulatory for importing for people to import, because people do take it for granted. They are saying like, if everybody I buy from the supermarket, it should be certified halal. It's not our responsible to actually certify. But the truth is, this hypermarket and supermarket, they are not responsible as well if the regulation don't kicks in. So I think regulation is really important. And definitely they go back to your question. Globally, there are different traceability standards. But I think the way of doing traceability is pretty much almost similar. So the only thing is whether we are using the interoperable codes that everybody recognize. So for the halal project, actually we try to bring in GS1 standard for most of the printings and all these things. Then we are also adopting FC standard for all the reporting, because I think that comply to most of the regulatory, including EU, US, and also other on seafood and all these things. I think they are all adopting GS1. That's why I'm trying to follow that as well.
Tay, I know although the project may be a little further out, I know you've also been working on potential projects in palm oil as well.
Mm.
Can you speak a little bit about what the requirements are there and how that project's going?
Okay. I think palm oil will eventually go back to the issue of sustainability. So, because of the EU deforestation rules kicks in. So when this kicks in, then for CPO producer, they will need to prove whether their palm oil are actually not coming from the deforestation areas. But right now, we do face a challenge. So the biggest challenge is they don't have the way to actually prove it. Even some big public listed company, they only 30% of their own are coming from their own supply chain. That they have their own SAP system or ERP system to actually trace the sources. But majority are small farmers, and all these small farmers, they have no way to actually report it to you. So that's actually the challenge that we are facing. So now we are try to implement or try to bring the advantages of this to the relative departments for them to be aware in order to address this issue. Traceability will be the fundamental technology to go behind it. So I think the work is still ongoing. So we also hopefully one day they'll be launching this platform. Actually, they did try to launch a platform, but it's still at a very early stage. So we'll see what happens.
You got my curiosity activated on the word interoperability. You mentioned that you are increasingly using the GS1 standards, but what I'm curious to know is what are some of the, because of given the digital nature of the traceability, what are some of the challenges that you come across most frequently to ensure that traceability solutions are interoperable across systems and technologies, and how do you think these challenges can be overcome in the future, in the near future in particular?
Okay, I am speaking on in terms of Malaysia context, because in Malaysia, the people especially industry player, they are still not very tech savvy. So honestly, most of them don't have the the insight into the traceability, how the GS1 code works, and all these things. So honestly, we are taking a lot of time actually to educate the customers. I think that is the lack of knowledge is one point for this part of the world. So that's where we are still trying to guide them, to actually to teach them on what will be the proper way of doing it. It's still kind of early for Malaysia in terms of going into the global aspects. So I think a lot of technology, um, educations, and also awareness is still needed for this part of the world.
You mentioned earlier that majority of halal foods or meat products do come from the non-Muslim countries, and I assume that
Yep.
even Malaysia does import a lot of meat products from one of those countries.
Yes.
If if like in cases of food contamination, and in situations of insufficient digital savviness within the industry, how does effective tracing happen? And I would love to learn more, because I do understand that digital solutions are not ubiquitous throughout the world. They are more present in the West or maybe the European Union, but that's not the entire world. So I'm curious to know how does tracing, especially for the food safety and in cases of food contamination, how are they traced short of digital solutions in Malaysia, and what are some lessons of effectiveness that you might be able to share for our audience?
Okay, actually, just now you are right that we have import quite a lot of meat product, especially all the beef from Australia, and also we have imported a lot of chicken actually from Thailand. Okay, so because of the meat cartel issue I mentioned the other just now, so we actually have an ongoing project which is working with Australia. So because a lot of meat are coming from Australia, and I think Australia have already put in a traceability framework for their beef as well. So that's what we are trying to do. So the regulation is still undergoing, but the objective is to ensure the beef all have unique ID, so that they know where the thing is coming from, who slaughter it, and then whether they are actually slaughtering complying to the halal standards and all these things. So during the import process, then they will definitely need to report it to the governments and all these things on the traceability information. So that is the only thing they are doing. Then but in case of happen any kind of food safety issue right now, to be very honest with you, right now is we still have limited method because this particular technology is still very mature yet. So it's still based on paper tracings, and sorry to say, we can still see quite a lot of recycle meat, which means over the expiry date, people do repackings and all these things still come into the market. So the digital trace for this part of the world is still not efficient enough. But I believe this is critically important because without the tracing, all the illegal food is still keep on coming in. So beside the meat, which is already ongoing, so for our Halal project particularly, we are focusing on the chicken slaughtering. So we will probably do a pilot, one of the pilot project, which is on chicken side, and might be involving the Thailand chicken import and all this.
And just another follow-up question on this one. I see a great innovation opportunity here in Malaysia, but then what I'm curious to know, who are the biggest drivers and funders of innovation in Malaysia, and where would you like to see more investment in innovative solutions in this space happening, especially when it comes to digital solutions that are going to interoperate with other solutions, both in Malaysia and around the world and down the entire food supply chain?
Mm. For this one, I think Malaysia, we have a department called MDEC, and also we have another is ministry. MDEC stands for Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation, and then we have another ministry which is Malaysia uh, Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation mostly. So actually, for our project, is actually funded by government. So actually, it's funded by mostly. So in terms of just now answer your question, the technology side right now, the biggest driven factor is still coming from government. The government need to play a very important role, especially MDEX is actually supporting the ecosystem. For example, for my side, because we are working on the Halal Traceability platform, so we have been adopted by MDEC as members of Islamic Digital Economies. And being that, actually, they are helping us to push the Halal platform, not only in Malaysia, they are also helping us to talk to countries like Turkey and talk to other countries to actually, even just now I mentioned about Abu Dhabi, which I might be going in February, is actually MDEC proposing us to pitch to the global Islamic community on the halal traceability to see whether they can adopt and to get further funding for that. But initial development funding definitely have to come from the government.
Tay, I have a follow-up to one of Illyriana's questions, and I have a new question of my own. So the follow-up is, in terms of halal and meat coming out of Australia, is that processed as halal in Australia or processed as halal in Malaysia when it arrives?
No, it actually have to start from the slaughtering house because one
Okay.
of the important about the halal for beef is the stunning voltage for the cow. You know, when you kill the
Okay.
cow,
Yep.
you cannot let it. The thing
Got
is,
it.
you cannot let it feel the pain, right? So the stunning voltage had to be right that you kill the enemy right away without them suffering. Right.
Got it.
So the stunning voltage become very critical, and even
Okay.
the knife you use to slaughtering the beef and all these things, that it's not really just because of sharp or not sharp. It's because of whether you let the animal suffering or not. But even quite amazingly, actually behind it, there is a story. There is actually some scientific factors about it because when the enemy start to suffer, their body will immediately try to release some toxic into the meat and all these things.
Interesting.
So that is actually important to make sure it was slaughtering instantaneously, so the toxic don't generate inside the body of the meat. Actually, there are still some scientific base behind this, but also in terms of faith is not to let the enemy to suffer. Yeah.
My new question relates something completely different. So one of the things I've observed that you do really, really well, better than most, is the way you kind of work with the government and shape programs. Curious as to how that developed, because I think it's a skill set that a lot of countries and people could use in terms of shaping programs. But I'm always impressed by what you do. So how'd that come about?
No, that is not that is actually a tough journey. Honestly, we have spent 2 years. starting from the beginning. But the lucky thing is we do find traceability is actually in the checklist, in the to-do list for most of the government. Even different ministry, they're all talking about traceability, but maybe they still not yet started doing it, or they still try to figure out how to do it. So that gives us the opportunity to go talk to them. We post as the experts in traceability space and all these things. That's why they listen. But it still take a long journey. Even before we gotten this particular project, it take us a lot of pitching to answer a lot of questions people throwing at us, in order for people to start noticing you and start believing this could be the way to do. But actually, in many industry, in some government agencies, especially Malaysia JAKIM, so we have talked to them. Actually, they wanted to do it. They eagerly wanted to do it. Yeah, but it's just like they want to know which is the best method to do it. So this pilot project will act as a pilot to let demonstrate the whole thing, so they can see the whole process how it goes. Then eventually they can adopt it. So it's not going to be a simple journey, but it will take a lot of iteration between two parties, and a lot of proof of concept for them to really believe it. Yeah. But the thing is, because of Malaysia is still quite I would say it's a blue ocean. That's why the opportunity is there. So in other countries like Europe, EU, the government already have put this regulation in place. So there's no chance for us to actually talk to government again.
I like that you mentioned Malaysia is blue ocean. It is surrounded by ocean anyway, but it's so interesting. Being a blue ocean, you just highlighted the long and a cumbersome journey to get to where you are with pitching and cultivating the collaboration, the bilateral collaboration. And with food supply, like supply chains in general, being super complex, the necessity to collaborate among stakeholders is never sufficiently evaluated or valued, right? And in your experience, especially with halal food tracing, where do you see more space and opportunity to drive collaboration, and who are the stakeholders that you love to see collaborating more, be it towards that interoperability that I'm very curious about, or developing standards that are going to support development of the interoperable solutions, especially if we're talking about a blue ocean, a country that may still need to regulate or still have space to regulate and can support this in a unique way. Like, I threw a lot of questions to you. I know.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Let me try to catch all your question and answer one by one. Okay. As I have repeatedly saying, Malaysia is a blue
Dave,
ocean. Sorry.
just maybe to simplify this. So bottom line, we know that supply chains are complex because of so many stakeholders coming in, and even in the halal food, some are going to be 100% halal players, some are not because they cater and serve different customer segments. But bottom line, I would love to learn from you about who are the core stakeholders that you see need to collaborate more, be it towards generating interoperable solutions or standards that are going to support development of interoperable solutions, especially in Malaysia being, as you highlighted, blue ocean. And then which one comes more as a priority, the standards or interoperable solutions?
Um, in Malaysia, I will still say is either standards or regulations, which is important because as the industry players, they do have some resistance why they don't want to go into. Some could be human, resistant to change. Some could be some vested interest that they have, which they are not willing to give up at this point. So in order for the whole supply chain to move, it's hard to go and educate everybody in the supply chain. So regulation is still important. So in Malaysia, the most important body, if you want to talk about halal, you need to involve an organization called JAKIM. JAKIM is the Malaysia, the well-known figure in the world for halal standards and halal certification and all these things. So this definitely we need to work together with people like JAKIM in order for halal standard and certification. Then they definitely need to work with, just now I mentioned about MDEX and also mostly because as a digital arm of Malaysia, they also put the halal digitalization of supply chain as one of the biggest sectors. So that is how we need to collaborate all these parties. And in terms of private sectors, not everybody see the opportunity, but we are lucky to get some people to be involved, especially not on the product but on the cold chain supplier, because in terms of halal, even the transportation is halal, have to be halal certified, right? So we have to get the cold chain logistic companies and some of the fulfillment companies to be on board. So we are lucky to have a company like MyEG, which they are working on certain blockchain technology for halal. So, and also we're actually lucky to get Bifrost, one of the biggest cold chain supplier in Malaysia. They're also halal certified, and some of them like people like Ninja Van, Foodpanda to be on board. So with them on board, then that give us a better opportunity to connect everybody, because they are product moving along this supply chain. So that is how we have to get everybody working together. But for this private sector, what they see, because they do have a feeling that digitalization is inevitable, it's going to come sooner or later. So I think most of them want to be the first mover advantage, right? So when they are ready, when the government try to adopt and announce, then they have a bigger opportunity for businesses and all.
Tay, my last question is around technology. So obviously, it takes a lot to pull off what you're doing down there with halal and other products that you're involved in traceability. What are the biggest technological challenges that you've kind of run up against over the last couple of years to bring this to life?
Um, I think we are still not at the stage to evaluating which technology is better and not better. Um, as I mentioned previously, Malaysia industry players are still a little bit behind in terms of what technology to use. So I think it still go back to the stage, or even they need to start the digitalization process before go and evaluate what technology is better and not better. A lot of them are still using paper trace, and I always try to joke that my biggest competition for pushing the halal traceability software is Excel, because everybody is still using Excel sheets to do all the compilations and all these things. They are not really an automated system. So my biggest competitor is not people like SAP, because SAP are still like us, like try to promote the technology. But our biggest competitor is always Excel. People are still using Excel, very traditional way of doing it. Yes, that is how
And
we
I was going to say, and it's not different here, to be honest with you. I think historically that's been one of the biggest challenges as well. This is not a Malaysia thing, I don't think. I do think, though, regulatory action like in the EU
mm,
and here in the US, I think is pushing companies to adopt technological solutions as opposed to kind of doing it in paper. But no, listen, Excel. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with companies who said we're fine. We use not just Excel. I mean, there was a seafood company in Mexico I was talking to for a while that used nothing but paper, just handwritten stuff, and it
mm,
worked well. And until they were pushed to invest, they weren't going to do it. So it's a it's I think that is changing. I think that people are starting to see the benefit of
mm.
using technology to solve some of these problems. And yeah, Malaysia's really fortunate to have you kind of on the forefront.
No, and one of the important thing is industrial player also we sometimes they will be a bit skeptical to adopt a new technology without knowing whether these are the technology to be used in the future or not. So they might be invested in a technology that become outdated in 2 years, or it became a technology that not adopted by the government. So that is sometimes they also a bit skeptical about this one. So right now that's why it's important for the top down approach, that at least we will need to start with a framework, so people do understand the framework, they know how to act. So I believe the other part of the world like EU, US, with the regulation coming in with the documentation is very helpful. That's why we are trying to do the same thing for Malaysia.
And I cannot resist not asking, in spite of the supply chains and logistics and even transportation being some kind of laggards in adoption of digital solutions, I cannot resist without asking you, what do you think is going to be the influence of artificial intelligence solutions on this industry? And do you see that is going to happen anytime soon, or is it still going to be the last industry to adopt that type of advanced solutions? And what do you think?
In Malaysia?
Malaysia or globally?
I think globally are quite mature already. We do see many countries start to have the regulation kicks in. In fact, now we are working on a few customers. The reason they are actually adopting traceability is because of the need to address the importation regulation for those countries. So I think with the regulatory body, they all know what data they can collect by enforcing this one. I think more and more are actually how to say, they had the incentive to actually try to enforce this sooner or later. Even the whole China is implementing the traceability. Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Thailand, they are all moving into that direction. So I think there is some direction that is not going to move. Even Malaysia is a little bit behind, but I believe in the next 5 years or maximum 10 years, most of the thing will be digitalized. So I think it's an inevitable trend that nobody can escape.
I think we asked them all.
I think we did. I think that's a good way to close out. Listen, Tay, it's always great talking to you. I mean, we're friends. I really enjoy hearing your thoughts, and you're doing great work down there. So we really appreciate you talking to Lariana and I today.
Sure, no problem. It's my honor to be joining you guys, actually.
Tay, thank you so much for dedicating your morning to the Beyond Visibility Lounge podcast. It has been a fantastic experience to listen to you, to learn from you. And I'm certain that our audience is going to love to listen to you even more. So we'll keep you posted and
No
come
problem.
back soon again.
Thank you very much.
One of the key takeaways from this conversation is that there is a unique innovation opportunity in markets with lower adoption of digital technologies. When thinking about collaborative traceability, innovators can integrate the interoperability component in the very design and the first sketches of the platforms. A critical role can be played by governments. Adopting adequate regulations and funding, the governments can truly accelerate generation of such solutions. So it's truly a combined and collaborative value chain creation, I'd say.
Your last point is a great one, Lariana. Consumers and NGOs have been demanding greater transparency from companies for several years with limited success. What we're seeing happen globally is governments mandating, through regulation, the inclusion of new value into value chains in the absence of companies doing it voluntarily. So listeners, what about you? What is your key takeaway? Send us a voice message and let us know what you think. We'd also love to hear about the visibility-related questions that have been puzzling you lately. We promise we'll listen to all of them and share the most inspiring messages in one of our next episodes.
Beyond Visibility Lounge is produced by the Open Salt Studio in collaboration with TraceChain. We are excited to bring you more inspiring conversations, so follow us to never miss an episode.
And if you know of anyone that may be interested in this topic, please send them the link. You may make their day.